Hello, it is day 3 of the IAE 2952 and today we have of course Aegis Aerospace. So that means lots of guns, lots of bang and quite a few interesting ships, and some of them are really good value buy. So let's go over it like the previous days. Quick look at the table where everything is at for a rapid fire, like is it good or not, and then we'll just take a look at the ships in more detail. Keep in mind, of course, some of the ships are still, of course, in concept or stages or not available. And it's Aegis, so everything is being used because, well, they have quite a few ships on the larger ones. Let's start with the lower level. Of course, we have two of their concept ships. The Nautilus, the Mine Layer, and the Vulcan. We will take a look at them this time. And then on the top left, we have the Vanguard series, venerable veterans of the game. Then on the top right we have the Adventure and the Redeemer. We'll talk about some really good ships there. Gladius, Hammerhead, Retaliator, Eclipse, and of course the Reclaimer and the Saber. So Vanguard series, still really strong heavy fighters, have the long range. Great ships if you want to do some two-player work around with. Honestly, I would take a Vanguard series over the Scorpius. The Scorpius is cool, has the X-Wing look. But the Vanguard series has a little bit more flexibility and also has the interior space, and depending on the variant you choose, you get some size 5 torpedoes, or you get an EMP or things like that. So all around good ships, and most of them are, like, value wise they're also good. So really not a hard one to recommend. I will personally say when it comes to the stock loadout, the Harbinger is kind of shitty. That turret has like rockets on it, which are pointless. Really completely pointless. So I would just look at a Sentinel Warden, or the cheapest version of course being the Hoplite. For the Adventure series, I mean, veterans of the game, and to this day one of the best ships to just have value wise. Like, they're the most recommended upgrade over your starter ship, because the value differentiation is not all that much. Like, I think you can have a base level Avenger Titan for like 50 or 55 bucks. So that's like $10 to $15 more than a Drake Cutter, and you do get a substantial increase in your capabilities from those ships. Just really, really good ships to this very day. Just shows them as a really strong design. They got, of course, one rework, and ever since they've been going strong and strong and strong. The Gladius, I mean, in the current meta, Gladius is still one of the top ships. It's slightly ranked below the, how do I call that damn thing again? The Anvil Arrow. It's considered to be slightly better because it's somewhat smaller. But light fighters are still the meta when it comes to the current PvP that we're facing with most of the time. And the Gladius is just a really strong fighter option in that category. They're of course not cheap ships, so that's something to keep in mind. But honestly, if you look at the capabilities that they have for a fighter, they are well worth their price. As always, recommendation of course, just buy the standard variant. So don't go for the Valiant, just get the standard Gladius. It's cheaper, and you can just you want to change the loadout anyway in game. So get the cheapest version and then adjust the loadout in game. Hammerhead, I mean, excellent multi-crew PvP ship and PvE ship. It is vulnerable, of course, to torpedo strikes, which is what you will see happening. But if you got a bunch of friends and you just want to go out there into combat, the Hammerhead is a very strong recommendation. But it does come in, of course, at a steep price. But yeah, that's what you're gonna get at this point. Retaliator. If you want to get the Retaliator bomber right now, just get the Retaliator base. It will give you the bomber version in game. The base is not out yet, because there are supposed to be modules coming in there. Well, we know that takes years, so you can probably play around with the Retaliator bomber for the base price, which is like 175, so it's really cheap. So if you want to lob torpedoes around on a budget, the Retaliator base is a really strong recommendation. The full fat version comes in at like 275, so that's a lot more expensive. But if you need bombers for whatever your organization is going to be doing, they can be a really good ship. That said, they're personally not a favorite of mine. I do not think that they are worth the crew demands that they have with all of those man turrets in there. So I still hope they will rework or rethink that ship at some point. The Eclipse, being the stealth bomber, it comes in at a steep $300 price point. Stealth right now is still not really a thing. But it being a smaller ship, it is more maneuverable. It can only fire 1 torpedo at a time, compared to the Retaliator, who can fire up to 4 in a single salvo. So that's something to keep in mind. But the Eclipse, being a more maneuverable ship, can also dump launch torpedoes against targets if you're really good at it. So that way it can make itself valuable. But it is, again, a bomber, and with most bombers, when you're looking at it long term, these are ships that you want to be operating in an organization level, because you need support for those ships, and you need something that needs that level of firepower. And especially when it comes to the Eclipse, that's kind of a ship that you will be operating in a flight, so you will have multiple Eclipses all together, because that way you can deliver that sufficient enough alpha strike to deal with very large ships. Saber series, I mean, they are a favorite of many people. They fall in the medium fighter category. It's supposed to be slightly like more stealthy or whatever, but again, doesn't really come into account. Full size 3 weapons. They remain just a very solid medium fighter. They are less flexible than the Hornet, that's for sure, in the weapon loadouts. But I would personally, I still prefer the Saber over the Hornet. But it is a choice, really. Either way, just getting the base Saber is not going to give you a bad fighter. It is a very good medium fighter, and it will do you really well in the PvE combat as well. And then, of course, we have the Reclaimer, big salvaging ship. Yeah, it's the gameplay is going to come in soon, so if you want to go into that, the Reclaimer, of course, can munch up just about anything. But we still need to see how the gameplay comes out. That said, it is a very large ship. Hopefully it's gonna get a rework at some point, because it does kind of need one. It's not that great interior wise. At $400, right now it's utterly pointless. Once salvaging comes in, it may become very, very useful again. So if you're really keen on in that salvaging gameplay, you want to do that. Right now you can pick one up, of course, with 10 years of insurance. On the other hand, if you get yourself an LTI token from the cutter, then whenever salvaging gameplay comes out, I'm sure they will be selling the Reclaimer again. You can just upgrade to the Reclaimer from your LTI, and you'll have an LTI Reclaimer. So right now, not really a ship I would recommend buying. Comes to the Nautilus, mine layer, of course. Honestly, it's one of the ships, the larger ships, that I just hard recommend against buying. I personally still do not see the point of it. I really need to see that ship and how they plan to use those mines, what they can do for it to be effective. And then even if it is going to be effective, this is really a ship that you want to be looking at acquiring from a larger organization standpoint, where you need to be defending certain areas. I don't think it's going to be useful for smaller groups because of its very, very limited role. And then the Vulcan is, of course, your resupply ship. I mean, that's always going to be a useful ship to have. Like, if that's something you're interested in, by all means, go pick one up. Then again, we don't really have anything for it yet, because it is not out in the game yet. So you can also just hold back and wait until it comes out. Of course, it being in concept still, that means that when it comes out, the price will go up. So it's a bit of an up and down decision that you will need to make. So let's go ahead and make the rounds. I think we're just gonna go pretty much. So I just go downstairs, and then we go up Central Hall, and then we just go and take all of the side halls like that. Let's do it that way today. So downstairs we go. And take a look at our 2 holo models. God, the music in here is terribly loud. I've turned down the volume of the game a lot in these recordings for that reason as well. And you can just see like how many ships, like Aegis has really got a strong lineup. I do hope they get more of that industrial stuff in there too. The Vulcan. Medium repair, medium refuel, as we said. I mean, this one uses the drones to do the job, and this is just going to be useful for solo players and smaller, medium level organization. A larger level organization probably has other alternatives to do the job, but they may still find use for these in some of their smaller scale operations that they may conduct. So one way or another, like this is one of those ships. If you're interested in this sort of a gameplay, it doesn't matter whether you're just doing it with, you know, one or two friends, or you want to do it in a large organization. It is going to have a use all the time, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to be needing to be refueled at least, and probably also patched up. So whether your organization is industrial, combative, transport, it doesn't matter. This ship is going to prove of value regardless of what you're doing. And that's why it's one of those ships that is just easier to recommend at any of the price points. Like, take a quick look at it, how much it actually is, because it's hard to keep all the prices in mind. I'm not even sure if it's on here. Bunch of sabers, Vanguard. Ah, there it was. Yeah, $200. Yeah, come on. Really. For the capabilities that you get, by all means, get this ship. Would not surprise me that it gets a very substantial price bump whenever it comes out. The Nautilus, well yeah, as I said, this is a mine layer, mine remover. It has some decent level of firepower on its own. But then again, if you're looking for a gunship, then there are much better options out there than this ship. And the mine laying gameplay to me is like, With the amount of mines that this will carry, you would need so many mines to be of an effect. Like, mining in naval warfare is very effective because you're mining on a 2D level pretty much. So once you put mines in an area of the ocean, that blocks that area of ocean from access for ships. In space, you're dealing with a 3D environment. So you need to mine in a 3D environment, which means you need so many more mines to block off access to a place that you really are questioning, like, how useful is it going to be. I could perhaps see this in larger organizations, as I said, that they want to secure certain areas, and if they have a bunch of these things, they are willing to spend the resources to just mine up like an asteroid field or something like that. But anything below that, we have to see more on this gameplay before I can say, yeah, go ahead and buy this ship, because it's not a cheap ship. It's like $700 plus. It's not out yet. So yeah, I cannot recommend the purchase of this Nautilus. So let's go back up and look at the Venerable Saber, and then of course the Mighty Reclaimer. These are the long-term ships as well. Like, the Reclaimer been around for a while. We're of course hoping to get that gameplay out a lot sooner, which didn't really happen. So yeah, the Saber, medium fighter, pretty much shares the spot with the Hornet. And a lot of it comes down to preference between the Hornet and the Saber. So I like to play, like, if you prefer a full gimbal loadout, the Hornet is definitely much, much better suited for that. The Saber really shines with a full fixed loadout. Because of the locations of where its weapons are, its gimballing is very, very restrictive. You can see here, these weapons will of course be able to swing out and up and down, but they cannot really swing in all that much. And the weapons here in the wings are even more restricted than those on the nose. So you just don't have a lot of gimbal range, which means that for the Saber you're gonna be flying this fixed. And that means fixed full-size 3 weapons is a really good firepower. Pack some not torpedoes, missiles as well. It is just a really strong medium fighter, and on the top of that, it also looks really cool. That said, if you need, as I say, if you need that gimballing, then you definitely want to go with a Hornet. It's gonna do you a lot better than the Saber. Over there we have, of course, the Saber Comet, which is like, just don't buy it. Just always buy the stock version of the ship. Like, when it comes to these, the Comet, the Fly, like these variations, which is just like a different loadout, buy the stock one. Because that loadout you're going to be changing all the damn time. Whatever is best on the loadout is going to be changing all the time as buffs and changes and things are being made to the game. So the loadout is not worth spending any money on. Like, ideally you could even, if they were to give you an option to buy one without any of the equipment, and it would be another $20 cheaper, that would be even better. You just buy it in game, especially if you already have multiple ships. And that said, like, the stock loadout of the Saber is just the standard Saber is just a very, very good loadout. You'll keep those weapons, you'll probably change the power plant and things like that, but the weapons are fine. Unlike on the Comet, which has like some scatter guns in there, it's just horrible. Reclaimer, well, you can see it's a chunky boy. Like, oh my god. It still looks like absolutely impressive, and it is massive, and at a price point of just $400, it is, for the size, in like Star Citizen terms, it is ridiculously cheap. That said, the interior is not amazing, so that's something to keep in mind of, and of course the gameplay loop is not out there. Once that gameplay loop is out there, I can definitely see this being a very useful ship, and potentially also quite profitable. When it comes to the final game, I think initially this ship is going to be insanely profitable because a lot of people will be fighting things out just for the hell of it. And then over time it will probably drop off a little bit. It's also not a ship, I'm not sure if you're going to use this a lot in large organizations, maybe you'll do it. But I can see this more being something for dedicated smaller to medium level organizations who just make it their business to be the salvaging people. So after a big fight they would get contracted maybe by a larger org to, hey, clear this area up for us and give us a percentage of whatever you're going to get out of it. Time will tell, of course, how people structure their organizations is entirely up to them. But yeah, at the price point that it is, at the potential that this ship has, it is not a bad buy. Keep in mind that for the current state of the game, there's no point to it. But at $400 for the potential future, definitely a ship that you can actually recommend. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bombers. If I'm not mistaken, they were this way. We're going to hull number 4, I believe this was. Yep, bomber time. So the Eclipse stealth bomber. I mean, I love this ship. I mean, it looks just amazing. Like, it's obviously like, yeah, we just wanted the B2 in Star Citizen. Here it is. I will say, if that was their inspiration, the loadout that it has is ridiculously tiny. I mean, it doesn't carry all that much of bomb load anyway, so something to keep in mind. Of course, I think the Retaliator's main inspiration was the B1, and the B1 Lancer, like, a lot of people don't know that the B1 Lancer packs more payload than a B-52. So, yeah, that it packs a lot makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it is a great looking ship. As I said earlier on, stealth still is not really much of a thing. Once it becomes a thing, this is probably a ship you need to fly with in a group. So you'd be flying, 3, 6, or even more Eclipses and using them as a first strike weapon. So if you need to deal with somebody's capital ship, this is like a couple of these, closing in, completely dark, at the last moment going live, launching their payload and getting out, can be really, really devastating. But it comes at a really steep price tag. Because, yeah, $300, it is more expensive than the Retaliator in its full bomber configuration. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, it being smaller and more maneuverable, etc., you can do the dumb launch torpedoes. So that just means you're launching a torpedo, it flies straight. If it hits something, it explodes. If you're an amazing pilot, that's definitely a capability that you can use. And you want to use that in the Eclipse, because the Retaliator handles like shit. That's the main issue that it comes to when it comes to flying this thing. The handling of the Retaliator is absolutely horrible. Like, I don't understand why, but whenever you fly this thing, it wants to go and change the direction, but then the moment you want to stop changing direction, it doesn't want to stop. Whenever I need to fly this thing, I need to use my boost all the time to turn the ship to do what I want it to do. I'm not sure if that's bugged or that's an intentional design, but flying wise, this ship is absolutely horrendous. And then of course the other issue that I have, as I mentioned earlier, it has too high of a crew demand on this ship. There are man turrets all over the place. They're all small man turrets as well, so it doesn't pack a whole lot of firepower. And that makes you need a lot of people to make this ship full on combat ready and effective. Or you're just flying it around with maybe 1 or 2 gunners, and you are more vulnerable. What of course does bring to the table is the torpedo payload. 6 size 9 torpedoes. Let that one sink in. 6 size 9 torpedoes. That is enough to toast quite a few Hammerhead class ships with ease from a very long distance, especially right now because there's not really all that much defense in there to deal with these kind of torpedoes. And that's of course something that we need to be looking at in the future as well, as like how is flak and stuff like that kind of affect the effectiveness of a retaliator. For now though, as I said, if you want to have a retaliator, if you want to try it out, you can of course try it out now for the Fly Free week, but you can also buy the retaliator base and you get the full-fed retaliator until they release those modules. And seeing how quick CIG is in releasing modules, it's probably going to be a while before that is going to happen. So just enjoy the retaliator until that moment. And it's just, yeah, it is a fun ship to use at times, but it has its limitations. It is a bomber. You're not going to be flying it entirely solo most of the time, because you just need some crew at least. And again, when it comes to bombers, you want escorts. You're part of at least of a medium level organization probably when you'll be flying these things around. And it's not just like, you don't just need a retaliator to be flying around with. You're also going to need the support ships for the retaliator to be flying around with. That's something you need to keep in mind whenever you're looking at your fleet, and also on an organizational level. It's like you don't need just the ships to do the job, but you also need the ships to support the ships that are doing the job. And the larger things get, the more complicated that entire scheme is going to become. Vanguard series, I mean, gosh, you gotta love the Vanguards. They are really, really strong options to this very day. They've been around for a fair while. They do require a 2-man crew for sure, especially if you want to go into PvP. You need a turret, because a turret means that somebody cannot just sit on your tail. Because of course, these being heavy fighters, they don't have the maneuverability. So light fighters can just circle around them all the damn time. So without a turret, you're extremely vulnerable. So they are a 2-man operation. That said, if you're looking to go into combat style operations with 2 people, these are some really strong options. They have good long range, they have good firepower, they have some interior space, but I think most versions, or all of them, also have some beds. It is a really, really flexible option. So yeah, when it comes to acquiring heavy fighters, the Vanguard series is an easy recommendation. My go-to pick would probably just be the standard Warden, because of it has a fairly decent standard loadout. The Harbinger has the most armor and also the most weight right now, so it flies the worst. The Sentinel, being the electronic warfare version, has the lowest armor and lowest weight, and it also brings the EMP. So yeah, for my choice, it's probably going to be Warden or Sentinel. And of course, you also have the Hoplite, which is like a light sort of dropship. So if you want to do some bunker missions and stuff like that, so you're going to fly then probably a group of 5 people. You have 2 people that just stay in the ship, so they can provide air cover, and then you can drop your 3-man or whatever size ground team off to deal with the ground-based combat. So if that's something you're interested in, the Hoplite is also the cheapest variation. It offers you quite a lot of flexibility when it comes to pure combat operations. But yeah, it comes down to it. Easy recommendation. Anywhere from 2 people up to the largest organizations will be able to use the Vanguard. Because of them being heavy fighters, I can see them being used a lot in fleet actions as well. They just bring that additional survivability. And when it comes to like fleet actions, you have to understand that like individual fighters doesn't really matter anymore. Because, well, you're so many people around the place, your individual piloting skill becomes less and less relevant because there's so much firepower going around all the damn time. Like if somebody gets on your tail, then the job of a wingman or maybe 2 wingmans is to get that person off your tail again. And a light fighter would need to be on the tail of a heavy fighter for some amount of time to actually do a dangerous enough level of damage to a heavy fighter that they would become into, get into trouble, so to speak. So yeah, the Vanguard series will remain a very good option throughout the game, just not as a solo player. Like, you do need at least another person in the turret. So speaking of solo players, I mean, Avengers, the vulnerable veterans, the absolute top recommended pick for a upgrade over a starter ship. They are capable in combat, they are capable in transport, depending on the variations. You may have things like EMPs and other fancy gizmos. You may even have one for bounty hunting with cells in there. They are incredibly good value ships, very capable for their size. So if you've been playing Star Citizen for a while, you just had your starter ship and you're like, I want a little bit more, and you're playing in your solo operations, but you want to keep that flexibility, and you don't want to be spending at the level of like a Cutlass or a Freelancer, get yourself a Titan series. Recommendation for me, get the cheapest one. Yes, each of these variations has their own unique things, but the base level Titan has a cargo bay and that's it, so that actually gives it, in the current game, the most flexibility. You don't really need the EMP, they're not that useful, you don't need cells, and I don't even know what the other one is anymore. At some point you're losing kind of track of these things, but yeah. Get the most standard version. It's going to give you the best all-around capabilities, especially in the current game. And let's be realistic, it is going to be a ship which you're probably going to be looking from upgrading from again. So it's not going to be your final ship in the game. It is also a ship I really recommend for the solo player. Once you go to group level content, you probably want a slightly larger, more capable ship. But if you just want to flying around with 2 people each on your own ship, you can keep these around, but yeah. Once you start to hitting even the level of a small orc, these are not ships that you're going to be using. There are 2 multi-purpose in that regard, and there are just ships out there that do each of their individual roles as a more dedicated hull better. And that's what you're going to be looking at from an organization level. Like, the larger you grow in your group, the more specialized each part has to become in order to remain competitive. Then we have the Redeemer. And the Redeemer for me is one of those tricky ships, because I honestly, personally, absolutely hate the way it looks. I find it disgusting. However, it is incredibly capable as a gunship. It is really, really dangerous as a ship. Those size 5 guns on those turrets are no joke. You cannot ignore this ship whenever it's coming after you. It doesn't matter what you're flying in. This thing poses a very, very serious and dangerous threat to you. I'm not sure if they changed the turret again for the front. That was slaveable to the pilot. If that's still the case, you really need a 4-man crew, pilot, and 3 turret operators, 2 for the large turrets and 1 for the small rear remote turret. You can fly it with a 3-man crew as well. A full crew, of course, would mean you get the full fat 5 people in there, and off you go. And you can even have some people maybe in jump seats or whatever to be used as some ground combat unit, but it's no longer a dropship really, it is a full-on gunship. And it is a really, really strong full-on gunship. The major weakness that it has is these giant engines get shot off all the damn time. And at that point, the ship becomes really hard to control. Tip, if that ever happens to you, what you need to do is not go for your max speed and acceleration. You're just going to spin out. You need to gradually, like really slowly increase your speed in order to maintain control of the ship, and then you can actually still limp it home that way. So you don't have to self-destruct the moment you lose the engines, but they are quite vulnerable. So that's something to keep in mind. And when it comes down to buying this thing, it's a hard recommendation to buy it. Like, if you want to have a gunship and you're flying around multiple people, and it doesn't matter what level of people you do, like as long as you have 3 or more people, this is a good ship to have when you want to do combat operations, or even if you just want a security escort for your industrial or holding operations or things like that. It is a really, really good ship, and even larger organizations will still be finding a lot of use for these ships. Because of those size 5 weapon systems on there, it poses a serious threat to a lot of ships that are, going to be approaching it. Like, a couple of these things pose a serious threat to a hammerhead even. And there's not a lot of ships that can really pose a big threat to a hammerhead outside of the torpedo bombers. So yeah, it is a really, really hard recommendation to buy, despite the fact that I still think to this day it is ugly as sin. But as I said earlier, I try to keep this, my personal bias out of it. Like, we just want to look at the capabilities that these ships offer, and the Redeemer offers unmatched capability when it comes to being a combat ship. And it's also just quite a lot of fun to do combat operations with. Like, we fly it around quite often. You don't need like as many people as you need to get full hammerhead crew. It's a lot more flexible, maneuverable, so yeah, great buy. Now the last options that we have from our venerable Aegis, of course the Gladius. I mean, it is still one of the top dogfighters in the game. It's a veteran as well by now. It has been around for a long time. It is one of the first ships that they're going to be upgrading to their full new UI system standards and all of that. It's of course a Squadron 42 hero ship, so you can be reassured that this ship will get a lot of attention all the damn time. So yeah, fly it a lot. Like, even if you don't plan to do a lot of combat operations, even getting it just in game and learning how to get used to it, especially when we get a new flight model in, is going to be really useful if you want to be playing Squadron 42 when it comes out, because you will be flying the ship a lot in that game. So if you're already very familiar with it, it's going to be a lot easier, of course, when you're going to be playing Squadron. Yeah, it's just an excellent, excellent little light fighter. As always, don't buy the variant there, just get the stock one and you will upgrade it as you see fit and as the meta demands at any given time, because of course weapons change around in their capabilities and their desires. And then finally, the Hammerhead. The flying pancake with a hole in it. The ramming ship. Ask the people that fly with me how they know that I like to ram things with it. I mean, it's called a Hammerhead for crying out loud. 6 turrets with 4 size 4 weapons on it. Missile bays of lots of size 3s and even some size 5 torpedoes. Powerful shields. And an insanely, stupidly slow stock quantum drive. Like, please do yourself a favor and upgrade the quantum drive on this thing as the absolute first thing you'll ever upgrade on this ship. The stock drive is painfully slow. It's not even fun. So you need to upgrade that drive. It's the first thing you absolutely need to do. Beyond that, you can get some better shields, but like the guns are excellent. You don't really change them. It has all the systems that you want. The main threat to a Hammerhead, of course, is torpedoes. That's just its nemesis are the size 9 torpedoes. Beyond that, this thing will just lay down a level of firepower that nothing really can match right now in game. And these ships are for that reason used a lot in combat missions and also in PvP operations. And they're just a lot of fun when you have your people around. So you got 6 gunners and a pilot. It is a lot of fun to play around in this ship. The only downside is that there's not enough content out there that really, challenges a ship like this. There's a lot of the missions, like when I fly this thing, I just park it and I just go to third person and I just watch my third gunners literally annihilate anything and everything. There's very little that poses a threat to this thing in PvE. PvP, of course, is a different option. It does come in at a steep price point. Of course, it is a larger ship, so it is in that sub-capital area. This is more like a proper Corvette in many ways. And it just does the job really well. And at that price point, yes, 725 I think it is. It's definitely not cheap. But you're getting a whole lot of ship and a whole lot of capability for it in return. So if you need, if you're flying with larger groups of people like this is a ship you need at least a small level organization for. Probably. I mean, honestly, at 7 people you already are like a small organization. And anything from there upwards, they will be making use of the Hammerhead a lot. It is an excellent escort ship. That's what it is designed to do. If you have a trade convoy, you will want some Hammerheads around it. If you have a mining operation, you probably want some Hammerheads hovering around. If you have a combat operation, you want some Hammerheads to shield your larger ships against fighter or bomber attacks. this ship is going to see a hell of a lot of use in the furs right now already, and in the future coming forwards all the damn time. Like when it comes to these subcapital grade ships, so we're of course talking Hammerhead, Perseus, Nautilus, and the Polaris. The Hammerhead is going to see the most usage by far of those, because it is just a escort, and it being an escort means it's going to be needed all the time. So yeah, very easy recommendation when it comes to the Hammerhead. You will not go wrong with it. You will very much enjoy its operations. And, sitting in those turrets is a lot of fun. 4x4 weapons, they destroy things, and making things go boom is enjoyable. So yeah, that was Aegis. Full loadout, every single hull being used, and a very strong lineup, of course, when it comes to your combat ships, and also some of your industrial and support. But of course, primarily Aegis is known for its combat ships, and well, most of them are just easy recommendations to acquire because they're all very strong within their categories. So with that, I will say goodbye to you. I will thank you for watching, and we'll see each other again tomorrow. And then we'll have to see what kind of fancy stuff we can say yay or nay against, and see what the capabilities are that the game is going to be offering us and throwing our way. Till then, I was Kade. Bye bye.